Hey guys, what's up? Happy almost Halloween. Halloween is actually my husband's birthday, so if you guys could drop him a happy birthday in the comments, I think he'd really appreciate it. Also, are you guys even doing Halloween this year? 2020 is so weird. This pandemic stuff. Are you dressing up? Are you trick-or-treating? Are your kids trick-or-treating? 2020 is the pits. But 2019 was not the pits. We went on a big road trip with Buddy. Buddy got to go to 8 of the United States before he turned 2 years old. And a lot of that was on an RV road trip that we took for about 2 months right before the pandemic. Obviously, we learned a lot along the way. This is my first service dog, and this was the very beginning of having a service dog. So I'm going to go over some of the stuff that we learned. I'm going to tell you some of the tricks and commands that were helpful for us for being able to manage him while we were out on the road, and letting you know what you can do ahead of time to avoid anxiety or frustration in the moment when you're actually there. With a lot of things in life, I feel like mindset is everything, as well as being prepared and knowing as much as you can going into it. So a lot of this is going to be things that you can do that will ease your mind, or what you might expect when you get there, so that you can just relax and enjoy going on your vacation, enjoy having your service dog and the help that they provide. I never know if I'm making any sense. I wish you guys were here so I could just talk to you. You guys know me by now. I really love lists. I love breaking up these videos into categories. So I broke this one up into 5 different categories, and I'm also going to show you a few pictures of Buddy from our road trip, partially because I can't help myself, and partially because I know you guys are going to love them. Enough chit chat, let's get on with it. So first section is the commands and tricks that we found it helpful to have solid before. Meaning, before you embark on your journey, it might be helpful to have these commands and tricks down solidly. Obviously, your dog's on-duty behavior is super important anyway, but especially important when you're going to mess up their entire routine and bring them to a bunch of new places in a row. Some other basic manners that service dogs should have, but I will explicitly state them because they came in super handy. Potty on command, very important. A really long down stay with the ability to self-soothe, so practicing that place command or some other cue to let your dog know we're gonna settle down here and be here for a long time. Leave it. All dogs should know leave it, especially service dogs, but again, everything is new, so leave it is very important. And potty bells. We actually found the potty bells to be pretty useful. I'll drop a link. But potty bells give the dog a way to communicate with you when they need something. And we found that Buddy uses them for all sorts of stuff. Usually, yes, it's just to potty or to go outside. But a couple of times he's used his potty bells, and when we come over to let him out, he directs us somewhere else to let us know of something like his toy is stuck under a cabinet and he wants it. So potty bells gave him a way to communicate, and we really appreciated having that. A couple other super random things. When you're on the road or when you're traveling, you can't always find an off-leash place for your dog, so being able to exercise or get a lot of energy out while they're on a long lead or even on their normal leash is something I would recommend. And if you don't practice that ahead of time, they might get kind of confused about why they don't have the freedom that they usually have. So practice energy release on a long line or some other way that you can energy release while they're still attached to you by their leash. Similar to that, there's a game that we play with Buddy where we get him super excited and then we have him come and sit. Or we get him super excited and then we have him come and sit and lay down. Practicing come and sit and down in the middle of zoomies, in the middle of their super excited state, really comes in handy if you're out on a hike or something and the dog is on duty, but they get really excited because, they're dogs and they're outside and it's an exciting place. So yeah, highly recommend that. I feel like I'm not making sentences. Sorry, I'm not making sentences. Just listing stuff. And one last thing for before you leave, you might need to adjust your dog's feeding schedule. This is especially true if you're doing a long drive, a long flight. Based on when your dog normally poops, you might need to change when you feed them leading up to your trip. I'm not going to give advice here. I would recommend just talking to your vet about how you can adjust your dog's feeding schedule or what other things you can do to make sure that your dog doesn't run into a situation while you guys are traveling. By the way, Baby is due 2 months from today. The third trimester has been a little bit rough on me. I'm back to having morning sickness. I'm also super swollen in my face. You can probably tell. I've gained a lot in my face since the beginning of this YouTube stuff. But I don't have cankles yet, so I'll take that. Category number 2 is logistics. This is good practice anyway, but you should always either carry or have access to your dog's veterinary records, especially their vaccines, their rabies vaccine. Super important to have proof that you have that, especially if you're going to state parks, national parks. We never got asked about showing our vaccine or our veterinary records, but definitely gives you some peace of mind if you need to show them that information at any point. Also, it is super important that you call ahead. Let hotels and tours know that you're going to be accompanied by your service animal. In my experience, we were a lot less likely to run into an access issue if a service animal was noted on our reservation. I think for some reason it comes off as like that the person who made your reservation already vetted you or kind of confirmed your service dog was real, even though that's not a thing. So then when you get to the check-in, they're like, oh, it's a service animal, it's already noted on here, you're good to go. This can also be really important for things like tours, and especially if you have a larger service dog. When we were in Utah, we wanted to go on this Dinosaur Tracks ATV tour, but obviously there's extremely limited room for a golden retriever on an ATV. So we let them know ahead of time that I did have a large service animal. They were able to put us in our own ATV. I should drop a picture here. Buddy loves ATVing. But letting them know ahead of time made sure that we had this ATV reserved, and it actually ended up being a private tour, which was really cool. It'll help you not run into problems, and it also gives them the courtesy of having time to figure out how they want to accommodate you and make those arrangements. So it's not just for you, it's also a courtesy for them. When it comes to this kind of stuff, you really need to know your rights. Like that the hotel cannot charge you a pet fee. They can't charge you pet rent for having your service animal. You can't be charged a pet fee for things like cleaning the room unless your service animal damages something. And there is no service dog registration in the United States. So in the US, they cannot ask you for a certification. They can't ask you for proof. They can't ask you to have your dog task. They can't ask for your dog's ID, any of that. And it is really easy to skirt around access issues by going online and buying one of those fake registration things and just giving it to them to make it easier on yourself, but please don't do that because that makes it so much harder for the next person with a service animal who doesn't have those things, because then it sets the precedent to the hotel employee that some people do have these registrations and then they're going to continue asking for it. If we all say, no, that's bull, then these access issues won't continue to come up. So please don't bring fake registration just to make it easier on yourself. Also, I wanted to note that there are exceptions to the service dog rules. There are things like housing and airplanes that are not regulated under the ADA, so they have completely different laws. There's also things like on our road trip we ran into Navajo land. They're not required to follow the laws by the ADA. So when we wanted to go on a tour of Antelope Canyon, which is on Navajo land, we weren't protected by ADA laws, and we had to find a tour company that did accommodate for service dogs. It wasn't a given that they were going to accommodate the service dog. And we actually only found one company that was willing to take the dog, and we ended up quite crammed in a bus together, but it was a really good time and he did a really good job. So that company rocked, but again, this is the importance of calling ahead. I can imagine if we had just assumed the tour was going to take me and a service dog, that would have been a very ugly day. That would not have been a good time. So calling ahead, knowing my rights, also knowing the exceptions to those rights, and respecting those, very, very important. How many times can Jen say important in one video? 50? Maybe 50. Category number 3, on the road or long stretches of travel. They are very difficult on humans. I'm sure they're very difficult on dogs who don't understand what the heck is going on or how long it's going to continue to go on for. So the mentality going into the longer stretches of driving that I would recommend having is that the dog is a living, breathing being with feelings and emotions and probably some confusion about why they've been in the car or on an airplane for so long. I personally feel like the dog deserves to enjoy the vacation just as much as the humans do, and that the dog should be treated like a family member anytime you're on the road or making a pit stop. this is just my opinion, but let's take two different scenarios. One where you treat the dog like a dog, and one where you treat the dog like your family. Treating your dog like a dog. You put him in the back of the car, you drive forever, you stop out wherever to let the dog pee, pull the dog out, the dog pees, you put him right back in the car, and you drive away again. That is like the most boring day in the history of ever, and I would never want to put Buddy through that. Versus treating the dog like a family member, what that would look like is giving random pets, talking to the dog, having them do little tricks that they can do in place. So we like to hold a hand out and have Buddy touch. He'll boop it with his nose. Or have him give us a paw, and we'll give him treats every once in a while for doing these little tricks. It breaks up the ride for them a little bit. And then when you do stop to have them go potty, play. Play just a tiny bit. Leave like 5 minutes so you can play with the dog, really truly engage with them, give them that eye contact that they crave, and it'll just help them get a little bit of that energy out. It'll help them not feel so alone. It'll help them feel included. I swear it makes all the difference when we are engaged with Buddy and we even take just 5 minutes to give him true attention. If your dog is a service dog, and if you're watching this, I'm assuming your dog is a service dog, they're really used to having a lot of attention throughout the day and being involved with you a lot. So that genuine attention during potty breaks, every few hours, getting 5 minutes of your uninterrupted attention, it probably means the world to them. Gosh, this chair. Okay. While we're on the topic of potty breaks, gas stations are an excellent place to potty your dog because they have outdoor trash cans, so if your dog does poop, you can throw them away outdoors, no problem at all. Like I said before, I think it's really great to play with your dog at that point. If it doesn't go against your training, let them sniff a little bit, let them look around, be stimulated a little, take in the scenery. I mean, sniffing is how they take in scenery, so giving them a chance to explore, again, even just if it's a couple of minutes, it really makes a difference in their day. I also use the potty breaks as a time to give Buddy food or water if I feel like it's been a long time for them. Buddy is actually a grades feeder. He doesn't have a feeding schedule. He just eats when he feels he needs to. So I'd offer him some food. Anytime I'm giving myself water, I offer Buddy some water as well. Even if it's just a tiny bit to wet his whistle, but Buddy, I think he holds about 16 gallons in his tank, so he can drink water no problem and then hold it forever. So I'm never worried about him with bathroom stuff. I know some people are though, so if you need to limit water, even a tiny sip to let them wet their mouth again might feel good. It's not always easy or ideal to add a bunch of extra time to your itinerary, but having extra time budgeted into your travel schedule is something that I would highly recommend. Not just to give the dog sniffing, but also, let's say you get out and it's muddy. Now you have a muddy dog. Give yourself time to clean them up. It also gives you extra time to budget in energy breaks. You might be able to find a big park that's only a small detour off of your trip, and you can let the dog run around you on that long lead, like I mentioned before. Have an energy release break on leash. The dog doesn't need an hour of sprinting around in order to feel like they got some energy out. Even 10 or 15 minutes can make a big difference to them. So if you planned out your day not to the minute, like if you planned out your day to allow for maybe an hour of dog time, but broken up into 5 minutes many hours apart over the course of the day, then you can stay on schedule and your dog still gets to feel like he's included as part of the family. And one more thing about being on the road for a long time, dogs do need to nap throughout the day, and it's really important to make sure that the dog is able to nap throughout your road trip or throughout your travels. That might seem weird to say, but when we were in the RV, Buddy didn't have a place where he was comfortable napping while we were driving. So we either needed to put him on our lap to let him sleep, or he would kind of fall asleep standing up, which is very bizarre, but that's what ended up happening. So that meant that we needed to schedule in breaks in our driving to make sure that he could get a thorough, uninterrupted nap. The best way for us to do that was to actually stop for a proper lunch or a proper meal so that he could be sleeping under the table while we were eating at the restaurant. So he was able to get some super deep naps that way. I know that it's not ideal to have to stop for an hour, but you don't want your dog to be overtired and really uncomfortable in the car because they're not able to sleep. Sometimes it's just a matter of having a bed or a pillow, a blanket, a hammock, something like that so the dog can support their whole body. But sometimes, like in the RV, that just wasn't an option, so you might need to be a little bit more creative about how to squeeze in your dog's naps. Category 4 if I'm being completely honest, really bothers me. Access and the public. On the road while we were traveling, especially in smaller towns, we did run into more access issues and more unwanted petting problems than usual. I think part of the problem is that they don't run into service dogs very often, and part of the problem is that when you're at national parks and state parks, there are a lot of international visitors or visitors from other cultures, and if they're not used to having service dogs around, or if they haven't been exposed to service dogs before, then of course you can't expect them to know how you're supposed to behave around a service dog. So one thing you can do if you have another human with you is use your other human to shield your dog from unwanted petting. So if I'm out with my husband, even at the local grocery store, I will walk with Buddy on my left, and my husband goes on the other side of Buddy. So even if somebody does want to reach out and touch the dog, they can't. We actually ran into a good number of problems on buses because the driver would often have us sit in the handicap section in the front of the bus so that the dog would have a little bit more room. But what that meant is everybody getting on the bus and everybody getting off the bus would have to walk right by us. Ideally, Buddy would be under the seat, tucked in, but sometimes that's not an option, especially in handicap sections that are big open spaces that are meant for wheelchairs to be able to go in. So sometimes Buddy was just sitting in front of me or standing in front of me, and a lot of people walking by would just reach out and touch his head over and over and over. It got to a point sometimes where I would have my hands shielding his head and people were reaching through my hands and I'm going, don't, and people are literally just reaching through. I don't want to blame these people who clearly just haven't been exposed to service animals before, but just know you're going to run into some weird stuff sometimes when you're traveling. And using your hands or using another human to shield your dog from the people who are coming in and out might come in handy just for the unwanted petting. Also, if you're going to small towns, some stores have shop dogs. So be aware that you might walk into a store and there's just a random off-leash dog that comes up and confronts you with your service dog. How you want to handle that is completely up to you, but yeah, that's a thing. Last thing in this section that I hate so much is if you are trying to get a taxi or an Uber or get on a bus, if at all possible, hide your service dog until the bus stops and then get onto the bus. I don't know if you guys watch Molly Burke. I absolutely love Molly Burke. Molly is a super popular YouTuber who is blind and she has a guide dog. And I know that Molly has talked in her videos before about how much trouble she has getting an Uber. She said that she has her mom go talk to the Uber driver about that a service animal is there, and then Molly will come out from wherever she's hiding to join and get into the Uber. Because if she was standing there with the dog, the Uber would sometimes just drive away. And I wish this never happened to anyone, but it did happen to us too. It happened at the Grand Canyon of all places. We were hiking with a dog, the sun was setting, bus after bus after bus was passing us and just not picking us up. We're putting our thumbs out, we're trying to hitchhike on these buses that were supposed to be stopping for us anyway, and they just kept passing and passing and passing and we couldn't figure out what was going on. And then my husband ran across the street by himself. I was on the opposite side of the road with the service dog. First bus stopped, no problem. So I came across the street to get on the bus as well. The guy said, no pets, no dogs. I said he's a service animal. And he did let us on the bus, but then he was super rude in other ways. And I'm going to make a video about that either next week or the week after, talking about all of the horrible, rude access problems that we had at the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon was just awful to us. So I'm not going to get into that. But point is, if you can swing it, don't have the dog be visible when you're trying to catch your ride. I am so glad that category 4 is over because that stuff just does not rub me right. Last category, category 5, is at your destination. In general, just be aware that there might be changes of plans. I didn't really learn this. I certainly didn't have an appreciation for it until I had Buddy and was trying to train him. But dogs are awful at generalizing. Gosh, okay. This isn't a technical definition of generalizing. Like, I'm not even going to look up what a definition is. But basically, if you teach a dog something like clean up with one toy, and then you give them another toy and try to get them to clean it up, they don't get it. Or if you teach them a trick inside, like paw, and then you bring them outside and try to do paw, they're like, what is that? We only do paw inside. What's paw outside? So why do I bring this up? I bring this up because by traveling with your dog, you are abruptly changing everything about their life. You're changing their routine, you're changing where they sleep, you're changing when they eat potentially, you're changing their access to water, you're changing literally everything, and they don't know what's going on. So whenever you're going to go to a new destination with your dog, while you're on the road or while you're traveling, while you're living somewhere that isn't home, you may need to change your expectations for how they behave when they're on duty. Usually when your dog is working, you are living at home, I presume, and then you bring the dog to the store, and then you bring the dog back home. So the store is a new area for them where they get stimulated and they're excited, but they can keep their focus. And then you bring them home, and that is the familiar place where they can really unwind and relax. However, when you're on the road, they don't really get that familiar place where they go home to relax. So if the hotel is a new area and they're all excited, and then you get in a rental car, it's a new car, it's all the different smells, and then you bring them to a field to play and run, and that's all new, and then you bring them to work, and that's all new. I hope you see how this compounding excess stimulation could be difficult on a creature that's really only as intelligent as a human toddler. It's a lot. They can have trouble sleeping, they can have weird eating habits, they can change their digestive system, it can make them have trouble with focus because they're not sleeping quite right, or, guys, a lot of things. It can do a lot of things to your dog. So I recommend just being patient with them and being understanding about the fact that they don't understand and that it might be a lot for them. And it could be a lot for them even if your dog is used to traveling. Probably goes without saying, but if you've been in the car forever, and the dog has been not stimulated all day, then they also might have trouble with on-duty focus due to that. So overstimulating can definitely cause focus problems, and understimulating can definitely cause focus problems. This is something that was especially difficult for us because when we were traveling with Buddy, he was just under 2 years old. So he was still kind of getting used to being on duty. He was still pretty young to be out as much as he was, so we were trying to be extra careful with him and make sure that we were extra mindful of him and his moods, his needs, and setting him up for success. So if your dog is older, more seasoned, used to working, it might not be as much of an issue for you guys. But for us, with Buddy being new to being a service dog, Buddy is also super high energy, so that made it so we had a lot to deal with. Let's see. What else did I want to tell you? Oh, something that did help with Buddy though is that even though we did go to a lot of different destinations, most of the time we were living in the RV. So most of the time at night, he did have a home to go to that he was getting used to. There were a lot of nights that we had to stay in a hotel because we needed Wi-Fi, because my husband is a teacher, so he was teaching online at the time while we were traveling. And so sometimes Buddy did have to go into a hotel, but a lot of the times we were in that A lot of the time we were in that familiar area of the RV, so that probably helped him a lot. The last thing that I wanted to mention is that if you really pay attention to your dog, they will give you a lot of cues. I already sort of touched on this a little bit, but I'll just dive a little bit deeper into that now. Some of the things that we noticed. Buddy started using his potty bells every once in a while for something other than potty. So like he wanted water or his toy was stuck. I think a lot of people are aware that dogs can lead you places, so pay attention to their eyes. If they're looking at you and then looking at something and then looking at you and then looking at something, and especially if they're doing something like hitting a bell, they're probably trying to lead you somewhere. Some other cues that he gave us: Buddy is super high energy. We went on a lot of really big hikes with him, but sometimes he would be like, guys, I need to lay down. I'm very tired. And he would just randomly go off to the side and lay down under a tree. Hot days, big hikes. So even though that's not ideal behavior, I don't want him just going off and laying down. It was also a really good way for me to keep tabs on when he needed water, when he needed to rest, when he wanted to get out of the sun. This one didn't happen with Buddy, but I have heard that sometimes service dogs will avoid their harness or try to skirt out of putting on their harness. I think that if that happens with your service dog, you should definitely take that as a sign that they're overworked. They're not feeling like they're in the mood for it, and they might be getting pushed too hard. And I feel like with dogs, it really is just like with toddlers in that case, where sometimes it means that they need to play, they need to get some of that energy out. But I think also sometimes it means that they need to rest. They're just overstimulated, they're tired, they haven't been able to get good quality sleep. So if you've been paying attention to your dog, hopefully you'll be able to tell what it is that they need in order to feel like they're ready to work again. You don't want working to become something that's a chore for them or something that they dread or aren't excited for. You want them to be excited to put their harness on every time. So yeah, just paying attention to their cues, super important. They tell us a lot. They're very, very smart and intuitive creatures. That's everything I'm going to go over in this video. There is going to be a part 2, and part 2 is going to go over packing, everything that we packed for the dog, and also shedding. Buddy has long fur and he sheds a lot, and we were in a very dirty place and living in an RV. So just general shedding and grooming tips, as well as the rest of the packing list for Buddy. It would have been a really big video if I added that here, so that's going to come out in part 2. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. And I know I already said this, but another video that's going to be coming out very soon is our access issues at the Grand Canyon and how the staff was just generally super rude and inconsiderate to us, specifically because of the service dog. So that is another video that you should be keeping an eye out for. I upload every Friday, but if you subscribe and turn your notifications on, that's the only way to make sure that you definitely don't miss those videos. Thank you guys for joining me. Hope you have a really happy Halloween, and I will see you next Friday with one of those 2 videos.